Good morning, everyone. We hope that this live feed that is happening at this time at Facebook page and also our YouTube channel may find you wherever you may be, feeling well and in peace. We are very happy to be joining you this morning to be sharing the study which was given to us as spiritual liberation, as you can see on your screen right now. Before we begin the reflections on the studies that we are bringing you this morning, which were basically founded based on the books Evolution in Two Worlds, dictated by Andreia Lewis to Chico Xavier and Valdo Vieira, as well as the title Life Challenges and Solutions by the Spirit author Joana de Angelis, dictated to Divaldo Pereira Franco, we invite you to follow along with us on a short message that we are reading from the book Happy Life. We will then proceed to do a short prayer before we dive into the study this morning. The message is, be a friend to all. Friendship is a treasure of the spirit, and it is meant to be shared. Like the sun, it shines and bestows joy upon all who receive it. There is a critical shortage of friends on earth, which breeds conflict, mistrust, instability, and insecurity. When people lack friendship in their lives, they put themselves in danger. Be a kind friend even if you are experiencing misunderstanding and hardship. It's a very good message, although short, it is very profound when we consider the need for solidarity, for love, for kinship of any sort, especially during the days of pandemic. So we leave the reflection here for all of us to consider the type of friends that we are being to those that we are blessed to be calling friends at this time. We are going to invite you all. Good morning, Anise, Marcos. Good morning, John, Giovanna, Regina, and everyone else who have joined. To go ahead and close your eyes or not, you can keep them open. There is no need for it. But definitely open your hearts as we think about our Master Jesus at this time and our Father, our Creator. And we give thanks for yet another day that we are able to open our eyes, to be alive, to continue on the present journey for self-illumination, for spiritual liberation, for the many opportunities that we are being given to be able to grow and expand, not only in knowledge, intellectually speaking, but hopefully the moral virtues that I am certain all of us united right now are seeking to achieve. And on that note, with much gratitude in our hearts, we are going to begin our study for this morning. When we talk about spiritual liberation, a lot of ideas came to mind when we consider the various aspects in which we can take the study this morning and the ways that we could actually go about in trying to develop an understanding about what spiritual liberation may be. It is true that spiritual liberation, the idea about it, the meaning about it, what I may consider it to be, may differ from your point of view. We can talk about the aspect of spiritual liberation when we talk about obsession, when we talk about how there is influences in our lives, be it for incarnate or discarnate spirits. We can talk about the aspect of spiritual liberation from our vices, the moral and the physical vices that we still feel enslaved into. We can talk it from many different perspectives. And because we have such a short period of time this morning, we invite you to continue in studying our Spiritist Center Conscious Living Spiritist group. I'm not sure if all of you know, but on Sunday mornings, right before our broadcast live, whether we are physically at the Spiritist Center or at our home while we are waiting for the pandemic to end, we do offer the classes for those that are interested in learning a little bit more of the Spirits book conducted by our friend David Walkden. It is a very good tool for us to keep deepening our understanding about our own immortality, about our life, about the spiritual realities that, whether we believe or not, we are all immersed in. Because of this, we are going to try to offer some reflection, especially on some of the books that we have available for us today, to further assist us in trying to understand a little bit more about our lives, about what it means to be freed from something. I'm not sure if you guys can see this image very well. I'm going to go ahead and change it so you can see how beautiful this image is of this young lady who basically takes a jump. She's freed from that link there that was holding her back, and there's a beautiful bright sun that is shiny behind her, as if giving the idea of a fresh new day, of a fresh start. And really, really, if we consider our lives up to now, wherever you may be, however old you may be in age only, because we are forever young, we will pinpoint moments where we were able to free ourselves from some situations. We know friends that have been able to actually overcome some obstacles in the line of trying to quit drinking and quit smoking. We know of friends who have been able to take a look at the way that they lead their lives and the way that they relate with their spouses. And because of love, that which really actually is the one very powerful force that drives and compels us towards this liberation, we find that we are going to see many significant changes in our lives. And although we're going to be talking about how we still have kind of like ways to go to reach spiritual perfections, it is true also that we have to stop and realize of how far we have come. And in order to illustrate this, we decided to start with the chapter called Spiritual Struggle. Here, I'm going to change. There we go. The Evolutionary Struggle, contained in the book Evolution into Worlds, and the Is Real. I added that. It wasn't Andreia Lewis who added that. I decided to do that because when it comes to spiritual growth and spiritual progress and spiritual illumination, the evolutionary struggle truly is real. It is not something that is easily attained. As we are going to find here, why is this not changing for you guys? The immortal spirits in his journey actually goes through this enormous struggle that actually begins to take place, that evolves the soul, whether incarnated or not incarnated. Therefore, human beings who used to chip stone and hide in caves, enslaving others with the violence of wild beasts, and indiscriminately killing in order to survive, are urged by the instructor friends who weigh them on their pathway to begin to ask about the cause of things. What are we talking about? My God, Andreia just kind of like dove into this aspect of an evolutionary struggle that happens for the immortal spirit in its journey. What we're talking about is the initial phases when we started after acquiring the aspect of the intelligent principle individualized, the spirit, the one that is able to reason, to think, to consider. What Andreia Lewis is saying is that when we began to actually be, if we want to say it this way, there was a struggle. Something started happening where once we were actually chipping stones and hiding in caves and enslaving people and killing in order to survive, something started happening in this huge transformation, which is what he's going to call later on a strange metamorphosis that starts happening deep within the soul, that actually makes us consider that, symbolically speaking, we are like the beautiful creature found in a butterfly. The struggle that it goes through to break free from that which was actually holding us back into the primitive stages of our lives. And what do they mean by urged by the instructor friends? The benevolent spirits that have been actually responsible for us for a very, 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 very long time. we aren't simply given the opportunity to reincarnate on a planet wherever they may be, whether it's a world of primitive beings or whether it's one of trials and expiation, such as the one that we find ourselves in today, transitioning to a world of regeneration. We are not simply left alone to fend for ourselves. In the beginning stages, we were instructed by benevolent spirits who were to us like paternal figures, trying to guide us, trying to incite us towards this and that way. And so Andreia Lewis will tell us that because of that, being instructed by the instructing friends, being compelled to progress, we felt this great metamorphosis taking place. If you guys have read the beautiful tale of the Metamorphosis of the Butterfly, I'm not sure if many of you have read it. You can go ahead and search online. It's really beautiful. The story about this little boy who is watching as the butterfly is trying to break free from its cocoon. And because it feels compassion for the huge struggle that the butterfly is actually going through, it tries to help it. It tries to assist for it to break free and fly. And once he does that, he realizes that the butterfly, although free, can no longer fly. It just kind of stays there. So the lesson behind it is that the struggle that the butterfly makes to be able to break through, to be freed, liberated from that cocoon that kept it in there during the changes that were taking place, during the phase where it was actually acquiring its color and its shape and the beauty contained in it, the breaking of it actually made part of it, because it was actually what was going to be able to pump the fluids necessary onto the wings so that the wings would be strong enough to soar high into the blue sky. This is so, so beautiful, because symbolically speaking, it is the image of us. It is the image of you and I in the beginning phases where, as a caterpillar, the caterpillar is actually kind of crawling along into hard places, into rocks, into mud, into stones, into what is considered to be dirty, until eventually it actually does go into this metamorphosis inside the cocoon, as if enclosed in all the transformation that is taking place. And symbolically speaking here, we could even say that perhaps it is a process of when we actually dive into the flesh, in the process of reincarnation, the countless comings and goings that we have actually been through, we are going to find that eventually, we are going to be able to break through from that cocoon and actually be able to soar high into higher spheres, spiritually speaking, of life. I'm not sure if you guys feel touched about this, and I apologize for this kind of very optimistic and enthusiastic way of speaking, but I actually was thinking about myself during the study. If we are able to just stop for a minute and consider yourself to be this butterfly, if you're kind of like me and you like to go out into the nature and watch the beings, birds, butterflies kind of flocking around and be able to admire them, my wish for this morning, as spirits, immortal spirits, that are going through this process of spiritual liberation, that we are able to take a step back this morning and appreciate what we have become so far, where we are headed. If we can appreciate how beautiful our destinies truly are right now, truly is. If you can envision where you want to get to, what you aspire to be, and we're not talking about anything material this morning. We're talking about what we wish for ourselves and those who we love, spiritually speaking. Where would we wish to be upon discarnating in this life? Because this is a certainty, right? And as spiritists or spiritualists, if you're watching this and you're not a spiritist, but you are a spiritualist, you know that life goes on. Where would you envision yourself being right now? Basically, this is the reflection for this morning. So, finding yourselves in this evolutionary struggle where there is this strange metamorphosis going through, Andreia Lewis continues in stating that the moral idea about life begins to occupy the mind of the spirit who is being affected by this strange metamorphosis. And through the evolutionary struggle, when it reaches this place where moral ideas about to actually occupy their minds, a sense of responsibility is born. The birth of responsibility sets in. This didn't happen in this present incarnation. It didn't happen in this incarnation. It actually took a while for it to get here. It is in this phase, in the birth of responsibility, that according to André Luiz, we find ourselves immersed in what he calls a concert of forces. The notion of God setting in, whether it was at that time where we believed certain things to represent God or not, it doesn't matter. It is at that moment that religion initiated, religiousness initiated within, where we were able to inquire about life and started experimenting, forecasting. The science, the aspect of science started to grow within, and with it, the instinct of solidarity. The instinct of solidarity. I'm not sure if you guys are feeling what I am feeling right now, but it is truly beautiful because according to him, all of this, actually, this concert of forces is actually what brings the immortal spirit in its struggle to adjust itself to the idea of divine laws. The divine laws that we are all ruled by. And if we study the Spirit's book, we are going to find the understanding about the divine or natural laws contained in the third part of the Spirit's book, where we start learning that everything truly is under control, and we, all beings of creation, are actually guided by these laws. Inevitably, all of us are guided, and it's infallible, because the creator of these laws, God, infallible, unmutable, actually allowing for us to be able to not only be immersed in it, but start with the notion of responsibility, of the understanding that something is happening. We start little by little adjusting to the idea of the divine laws. And one way that we start to understand about that is when we consider that God truly is just, good, benevolent, charitable, a lot of the things that we study about as the qualities of the creator, because we start understanding the law, for example, of cause and effect. The Spiritist that has this notion of religiousness no longer sees God as a mean old man sitting up at the sky, pointing a finger at us for the mistakes that we have made in previous existences, but rather a father, an educator who, understanding that we are still in this spiritual infancy, allows his children to incarnate as many times as needed to be able to grow and evolve, to be able to discern between what is right and what is wrong. And it is in the action, it is through the experiences that we start understanding what is right and what is wrong. It is through the mechanisms of the divine law of reincarnation that we start understanding that perhaps today I am reaping a fruit, whether it's a very sweet one or a bitter one. We reap the fruits that we sow. We are actually the architects of our own destinies. And this in itself is something very powerful when we talk about the aspect of spiritual liberation. This is actually what makes us feel so enthusiastic about life itself. Because even when the tough gets going, even when we go through obstacles, even when things start to get truly tough and we feel sometimes that we are spiritually exhausted, we know that there are resources available to allow us for picking up yet again, facing a new day, seeking to overcome the challenges that are thrown our way. And yes, we can count on people to assist us, as the beautiful opening message that we read about friendship. Of course, we can count on our friends, yet we know that the true hard work, labor, belongs to each one of us when it comes to going through this struggle of this spiritual liberation. Perhaps in the idea where we are becoming adjusted to the divine laws, where they are actually being sculpted into our conscious, perhaps this is what made Allan Kardec feel so inspired as far as going to question the benevolent spirits in the Spirit's book, question 621, where the laws of God were written. And the benevolent spirits answered in the conscious. It's there. It's available to all, regardless of whether we are rich or poor, whether we are from Brazil or France or the United States, regardless of whether we are black or white, regardless of our sexual orientation. The laws are imprinted in the conscious of the being. When the notion, the birth of responsibility set in, when we started acquiring, going from a spark of reason towards developing the divine spark, actually, we see that the laws have been in our conscious all along, only waiting for the maturity of the soul to be able to acknowledge them. And we do. We do acknowledge them already. We are able to have this certain discernment where we know right from wrong. There is something deep within that often, if we are just cautious enough to silence before taking an action, before making a decision, understanding about moral laws, we start questioning whether what we are about to do is actually going to have a positive outcome or not, for the benefit of all. For the benefit of all. It's not just the best interest, my own best interest that takes place. No, it's that of the person that is next to me as well. So if I am able to just stop for a second and consider, if the decision I'm about to make, is it going to be just beneficial to me? Am I going to hurt anyone along the way? Am I going to inflict pain in any way, shape, or form? And we are able to answer that we are not, that everything is fine, that we are not going to infringe any type of moral ideas or ethics, then we are safe to proceed. If we are not able to answer that, we know that that's a warning, Perhaps stop, look both ways before crossing the road, if you will. And so as continue, Andreia Lewis will tell us that proceeding in a rational way from that moment on, it's when we underwent that profound transformation that took us to be where we are today. When we open the book On the Way to the Light, we are going to find that there were actually a moment where the very high order spirits started asking God, the missionaries that answered to God, really high order spirits, asking for something or someone to come and assist us further in our evolutionary progress. And in answering the clamor of those voices, God then decided to send us the one liberating key for all of humanity that would be personified, that would be someone that would come and not only lead by teachings, but also through the examples. And of course, we talk here about the most perfect standard that God has ever provided humanity with to be the guide, the model, as we continue searching for the spiritual liberation that we actually look for. What is the perfect standard that God has offered to humankind as guide and model? Look at Jesus. Jesus is at that moment in the process of spiritual liberation after a very long struggle, evolutionary struggle, as we saw contained in the book, Evolution in Two Worlds, coming to us at that dawn of a new era, a new sun that shone, that still shines deep for each one of us, as if giving into where there was a dark, dark, dark night on earth, the dawn of a new era, with a new sun that was actually shining and actually trying to make its way, its rays of light illuminating the very earth, if we want to talk this way, but also within, Emmanuel will tell us that he began the process of spiritual liberation for humanity at that moment that he dove into the flesh and brought us the lesson of the manger, as if establishing that before any other virtue, we were to start learning about humility. If we consider about the depth of this message, we're going to find out that oftentimes we will become imprisoned by certain situations because of our pride, because of our vanity, because of our inability to give in. There is a beautiful part of the book, Heaven and Hell, that I promise I will make sure that I come back here and put in a note for you guys, that Allan Kardec says that if we were able to just perceive the eternity before us, we would be able to give in for 5 seconds, to give in, to allow for, let's use several examples here, forgiveness to set in, to not have to have the last word, to not have to always be right. We are right, but the relationship that we had so precious to us goes awfully wrong from the moment that we have of intemperance, of being able to just give in, just that one moment, of letting the person before us have the last saying, as if that would make us be any smaller, to just allow someone else to have that moment where it seemed to be glorious for them. So some of the things that we consider from a very small point of view to a greater scale, where we see wars happening in a small scale between two beings, and then we see it growing as we have in the history of our humanity. And of course, we're not going to dive into that right now, but basically this is what he was talking about. As the dawn of this new era, the solution, the very first solution for the spiritual liberation was actually symbolically represented by the manger, the coming of the greatest spirit that has ever walked the earth, but he chooses the most humble scenario to make his great entrance. For all of us, that's a very impactful teaching alone. He would come, and as Emmanuel would say, the word alone had this great ability to build within those that were awakened, that were aware, that were actually aware, already ready to understand. His word was so great that it built within the faith, great enough that it would allow the person to have a glimpse of what awaited them on the other side of the spectrum, should they be able to simply put in practice all of that he was teaching at that time. One of the great examples that went from a reason, a sparkle of reason, to a huge divine flame is the example of Francis of Assisi. So beloved by so many people. I'm sure a lot of people that are following us right now have an admiration, even if there is none of the Franciscan followers here. But how amazing the life of Francis of Assisi. We can talk about another being whose spiritual liberation was so impactful that actually still leaves many examples for us to follow today, as in the great transformation of Paul of Tarsus. We see how he was able to liberate himself, the old man, Saul, transformed, liberated, freed to become the great Paul of Tarsus. And not only that, be able to, through his own example, his tabernacle, as he called it, be an inspiration, an example to others that follow along as well. Mary of Magdalene, I am never tired of thinking about her and how amazing her transformation was. She was actually freed from the 7 demons that actually tormented her. And of course, we talk about obsession here. The spirit that actually not only enslaved her in the passions, because she was searching for love in the wrong place. So the love that she was seeking could not be found in the way of life that she was leading. But then she met him, the great liberator of all souls. And her life would never be the same after that. Self-love set in. Another type of solution for spiritual liberation is self-love. is when the person realizes that he or she is actually divine, created by a Father that is all love, heir to the universe. Have you considered to stop about this? A lot of people walk along today with this feeling of not feeling worthy, that they're nothing, with the esteem so low as to allow other people to take advantage or to abuse them. Or worse yet, with the esteem so high that they feel that they are superior to others. And Mary of Magdalene was actually able to get in touch with the kind of love that empowers the being, not empowers over others, as in overcoming oneself, in seeking the solutions, in seeking the process that would be actually very strong for the spiritual liberation of the soul. Today, when we're talking about this, and again, we mentioned how we could go many ways, many forms. Today, we decided to dive into the gospel because Joana de Angelis states in the book Life, Challenges and Solutions that Christ and the examples contained in the gospel are actually offer material enough for all of us to actually assist and facilitate the process of spiritual liberation. And we are going to begin with the phrase that actually is often used, or better yet, the word that is actually often used in the gospel that has to do with human behavior and how we are able to change that. And she talks about human behavior being referenced into either being asleep or being awake. And this is actually where we're going to start bringing some examples contained in the gospel according in the Gospels of Jesus, not the Gospel according to Spiritism, but the Gospel of Jesus. We are going to actually go fast here. And here's what she has to say. Awakening, let me change the slide for you guys. Awakening to a new reality about life is like undergoing a profound, liberating, painful, yet happy inner childbirth. Now, I am not a mother. I have never had any children, but I'm certain that those that are listening right now, I know there are many moms connected right now. Good morning, everyone. I see some new people that are commenting right now. They say that childbirth is actually something that is very painful, yet it is the most wonderful feeling when the child actually is born. This feeling of immense joy when the mother is actually holding that child in her arms for the very first time. So Joana de Angelis actually makes a comparison of awakening of the soul as this beautiful, profound, liberating pain that yet is actually that is very, very happy, that is actually going to be very, very good for all of us. And so over 2,000 years ago, the son of a new era came, the dawn of that new era, calling all men and women to observe whether we were asleep or whether we were awake. And one of the great examples of whether someone was asleep or awake or not was contained in the gospel here of John, chapter 11, verses 1 through 44, in the example of Lazarus. Now, I don't know if you guys remember how it actually went, but the story was that Jesus was called to visit the apparently dead Lazarus. As he approached the tomb, he actually said to his friends and his two sisters that were there that Lazarus wasn't dead. He was actually sleeping. And not only that, he ordered everyone to actually roll away the stone that was actually closing the tomb. And he ordered Lazarus to awake and come out of the darkness. This can be very symbolic if we consider this. Be awake and come out of the darkness. And so when we consider spiritual liberation, we see that not only does it mean being awake, being aware, but also seeking the light, coming out of that dark tomb and seeking the light to be able to better see. When Lazarus heard the voice, resounding in the acoustic of his soul, in the state that he found himself in, he awakened, regained consciousness, and came out of the tomb. Why? Because Lazarus was already awakened to the spiritual realities. So this is something for us to just kind of break in a little bit of the understanding. And if you don't know about this, this actually is very well explained in the book Genesis, Miracles and Predictions According to Spiritism, the 5th book of the Spirit Codification, in which we see that Jesus was fully aware that death was actually not what had taken place with Lazarus' spirit. The powerful ties that unite the perispirit to the physical body were not broken. So it wasn't like he resurrected from the dead. Lazarus was actually alive, although asleep. And so when he awakens, that organic deep sleep is brought on by catalepsy. Actually, Lazarus had already awakened to the reality of the soul, and that's why he was able to hear the echoes of Christ's voice deep within his soul. One of the miracles here that can be very important for us to understand the symbolic message behind it, because there isn't one single passage or example contained in the Gospels, wherever they may be, that is not meaningful for our spiritual liberation. We just have to have eyes to see, ears to hear. And the Gospel according to Spiritism, the 3rd book of the Spirit Codification, comes to try to simplify some of the messages contained in the New Testament. Another person who actually awakened, who was actually awake, that we talked about here, was Paul of Tarsus. And not only was Paul of Tarsus significant as a figure, but he also was able to, through his countless letters, whether it was to the Romans or the Philippians, or it doesn't matter, he was able to actually bring a lot of the teachings in trying to awaken many people in different types of situations, often writing in such a way where he was able to reach different individuals in different degrees of the state of sleeping, in which his listeners or followers were able to perceive the message. So in this letter to the Romans, he stated, "And do this, knowing the time that now it is high time to wake out of sleep, for now our salvation is nearer than when we first believed." And so he keeps people distracted there and trying to make them realize that the type of distraction that was actually keeping them from the true reality of the soul was actually what he was trying to keep them away from. So what are some of the distractions that actually keep us in the state of being asleep, not awake, if you will, not aware? Pointless arguments. Here we go. Our salvation is nearer than when we first believed in it, meaning don't waste your time anymore in pointless arguments, in superficial type of lifestyle. Don't put yourself into any type of mechanisms that actually stall your steps. We've already understood what the aspect of salvation is, so don't waste your time on that. Keep on walking, keep going forward. That's basically what he meant to say. And then he decides to write to the Ephesians. And here's another beautiful passage. Therefore, he says, "Awake you who sleep, arise from the dead, and Christ will give you light." And of course, the appeal is not addressed to people who are physically dead, but although physically alive, actually lived as if they were dead to their own selves. So awake you who sleep and rise from the dead. So Joana de Angeli tells us something really beautiful. She says that those that he was calling for at that moment, they were in spiritual hibernation. You know, it's so interesting the words that he used. Spiritual hibernation, sleeping there for a long time, completely unaware of the wonderful qualities of their own immortality. That's you and I. We have these amazing qualities that are part of our immortality, just simply waiting to be wakened within. the time of pandemic is something really interesting, because when we look at some of the very fraternal and solidary movement taking place in the world right now, it is actually answering to the invitations from Paul in this letter to the Ephesians to awaken. We are no longer living corpses, just going about life. We are actually alive, and we have ennobling ideals that are inside that needs to be discovered by each person, every single one of us. We are able to find what those ennobling ideas are, what the true essential objects of our lives are. So the objectives of life is what to you? This is what Spiritism proposes to do. The objective of my life can be completely different from yours. And this is something that only the person who is actually in touch with him or herself can do. When having enough courage to look inside and find out what still needs to be worked on. One of the letters that were sent to Allan Kardec in 1868 in the Spiritist magazine of the resident of the Mauritius Island. We did a study before this, so I apologize if this is the second time you're hearing this. But one of the subscribers to the magazine actually started describing to Allan Kardec his current condition during the pandemic. There was this malaria fever that actually took hold of the Mauritius Island for the period of 2 years, killing over 60,000 people. And during 3 months, all Spiritists needed to be isolated from each other. Sounds familiar, yeah? We are here isolated at home. But then the subscriber to the magazine said something very interesting to Allan Kardec. He said, I am fully aware that I may actually fall ill to the illness, and I actually participate in the Parisian Spiritist Society's meetings as a spirit, as a discarnate spirit, and I'm fine with that. So here's the first quality of someone who is awakened to the immortal, ennobling ideas and objectives of life. It's knowing that life goes on regardless of where we are. Being actually out of the physical body is not a spiritual liberation, because we may actually discarnate and continue being exactly whom we are. We may know actually that's going to happen. Everything that makes up whom I am will still be when I am out of this physical body. Qualities, vices, all of it that makes up whom I am is actually who I will be upon discarnating. But the subscriber to the magazine said that because he needed to be isolated, he started occupying his mind in paying attention to what still needed to be worked on. I'm not sure if there is any more that we can learn from this subscriber. Being isolated was forcing him to take a deep look within his soul and say, wow, what is it that I still need to work on? What is it that I still need to perfect to be able to, through the physical death, I will be able to become liberated spiritually from all those ties that still holds me back. It's a very individual journey that we do. We may have somebody beside us who is the love of our life, who may be guiding us, who may be serving sometimes as a student, as a teacher. I'm talking maybe perhaps a spouse that you may have, or a child, or a brother, a sister, a mother, or father. It doesn't matter. They may actually encourage us to become better persons. They might. But the inner work belongs to each one of us. I am the one who's got the chisel to start kind of correcting that which still needs to be polished inside. And this is why I like to compare often the immortal spirit as a diamond in the rough. Every diamond is unique, different colors, different clarities, different shapes. All of us are like diamonds in the rough, still needing the polishing here and there. Reincarnation provides that. Yet, we need to make the most of our time as to not waste precious opportunity that we have in this present life. Because the challenge of sleep is great, because of the fact that for many existences, we stayed in that permanent state in the early stages of evolution that actually allowed us to go from one spiritual phase to the other. Yet, like we mentioned, 2,000 years ago, we had the sun of the new era shining as it does in this fragile plant that is actually breaking through the soil. Another beautiful symbolic example of spiritual liberation, breaking through the dark soil as we reach for the light. We find enough comforting material to know that if we have the courage of actually awakening, we will understand that it is urgent to be awakened, because not only does it liberate us and confer authority on the discernment, being able to know what is right and what is wrong, being aware of our action, it is actually that one factor that is going to facilitate even more being able to have the courage to follow the steps of the one who actually came to us over 2,000 years ago to show us. We're talking about the guide and model that we have in our Master, Jesus, whose exemplary life has endured all of the storms of time and all of the acerbic and pungent criticisms of many thinkers. Jesus, ladies and gentlemen, is the true divider of waters of history, and he is the true divisor of the water of history of our own past. Before us, before we were, he was already there. And when he came as the dawn of a new era, that's where, when we were able to actually grasp the meaning about his presence in our lives, guaranteed, and in no way, shape, or form being fanatical, but rather remembering a faith that is based on reason. If we are able to really say that we understand that he is the model and guide offered to humanity of good conduct in living, he too will be the true divisor of water in our own personal history. We have come a very long way. We have. It's beautiful to see the transformation that we have come through in this lifetime. Upon this incarnation, I'm sure that we are going to have a glimpse of the steps that we have taken closer and closer to being liberated from all of that still holds us back, still heirs of a world of trials and expiation, but ones that are working hard enough to be able to be the heirs of the earth, inheriting the earth as contained in the Beatitudes, another code of good living and spiritual liberation that we have in the lessons that are there. I know it's a lot of information, but the idea today was to try to get you as optimistic and enthusiastic about life as I felt doing the study this morning, to be able to look in the mirror today and say, hey, I have come a long way. Yes, I have a long way before still to do that, but I have so much that is empowering, that is able to allow me for discernment between what is right and what is wrong. I have the knowledge that before me, there is a beautiful destiny that awaits, that is actually going to allow me to get there sooner if I have the courage to look within and search for the tools necessary to break through to that still enslaves me to the condition that I am in today. And I know that we all can do that because Christ is the example of how to get there. I hope this was a bit of a moment that offers this morning a little bit of quietude from the world out there. I know the pandemic is still happening, creating still a lot of anxiety, a lot of ill feelings, but be encouraged was something that he always said to those who sought him when in despair, when feeling discouraged. Be encouraged and be faithful, full of faith, for better days are yet to come. And with this, I invite you, dear friends that are listening, to conduct our final prayer this morning, saying, thank you so much, dear Jesus, for having been given the role of taking care of us and having accepted with such love that you didn't think twice when coming 2,000 years ago to appoint the way and say, hey, I did it and so can you. Thank you so much for the blessings that we have, such as the ability to open our eyes in this morning, a new day in this incarnation. For we know that we are never going to be certain when God is going to be calling us back home. Yet, because of Spiritism, the promised consoler by you, we have the faith, the courage, and the knowledge that when that day is to come, we will look back with gratitude in our hearts for not only having had you as our divine master, divine friend, psychotherapist and doctor of our soul, but also the Spiritist body of knowledge that was given to us at this present incarnation to strengthen us even more in the constant work of spiritual liberation. I ask, dear Jesus, for all of those that are listening at home right now, asking that you bless our homes and those of the ones that are listening, and keeping us close to your hearts so that we can continue hearing the echoes of the voices of the missionaries that work on your behalf, encouraging and guiding us, even during difficult and tiresome days. Thank you guys so much for being part of us this morning, of this live feed. And until next week when we are together again, have a wonderful Sunday, everyone.